Hey everyone. Today we're going to be looking at anxiety and depression, and some practical strategies that we can all use to, help manage those conditions. Sometimes they feel overwhelming, and let's dive in.
Yeah, it's important to understand the difference between those everyday feelings of stress and sadness and what actually constitutes a clinical condition.
Right. So how do we know when it crosses that line? Like
Yeah.
when is it more than just having a bad day?
Yeah. One of the key distinctions is the intensity and the duration.
Hmm.
So, for example, with clinical anxiety, you might find yourself constantly on edge, worrying excessively about things. You might be experiencing physical symptoms like a racing heart, difficulty sleeping, or even panic attacks.
Hmm.
Depression, on the other hand, can manifest as a persistent feeling of sadness, hopelessness, or loss of interest in the things that you once enjoyed. And it can also have a real impact on things like energy levels, sleep patterns, appetite. It can really affect your whole life.
Yeah. It sounds like both anxiety and depression can really take a toll on your well-being.
Absolutely. And they often occur together. In fact, research suggests that around 50% of individuals with depression also experience anxiety.
Wow, that's a really significant overlap.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some ways to manage these conditions. Starting with anxiety, what are some practical tools that people can use?
Well, when anxiety strikes, one of the simplest yet most effective techniques is, believe it or not, deep breathing.
Mm.
It might sound basic,
Yeah.
but it directly counteracts that physiological fight or flight response that kicks in when we're anxious.
Right.
That feeling your heart's racing, your breath is shallow.
Yeah.
So how does deep breathing actually help in those moments? Well, when you consciously slow down and deepen your breath, you're sending a signal to your nervous system to calm down. It's like hitting the brakes on that runaway train of anxiety.
Okay.
There's a popular method is called the 4-7-8 technique. So you breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 7, and exhale slowly for 8.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard of that before, but I've never really understood why it works. It's amazing how such a simple technique can have such a powerful effect.
It really is. But, sometimes anxiety is more than just a fleeting feeling. If it's a recurring issue, it might be helpful to explore something like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT.
Oh yeah, I've heard that term.
Mm.
What exactly is CBT and how does it work?
Well, CBT is a type of therapy that focuses on the connection between our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. It helps us identify and challenge those negative thought patterns that contribute to anxiety.
Right.
So let's say, for example, you have a presentation at work and you find yourself thinking, oh, I'm going to mess this up. Everyone's going to judge me.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
That thought can trigger feelings of anxiety and fear.
Right. It's like those thoughts almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
We get so caught up in the negative possibilities that we actually make them more likely to happen.
That's it. And that's where CBT comes in.
Okay.
It helps you break free from those negative thought loops by teaching you to reframe those thoughts. So instead of thinking, I'm going to mess this up,
Uh-huh.
you might ask yourself, well, what evidence do I have for that? Or what's a more balanced way to look at this situation? You might realize, well, you've given presentations before and they've actually gone well.
Right.
Or even if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world.
So it's about kind of developing a more realistic and helpful perspective.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that our thoughts aren't always accurate reflections of reality, and we actually have the power to choose more helpful ways of thinking. And in addition to CBT, mindfulness and grounding techniques can be incredibly useful for managing anxiety.
Mindfulness and grounding. Interesting. Tell me more about those. What do they involve?
Well, mindfulness is all about being present in the moment without judgment. It's about noticing your thoughts and feelings, but without getting swept away by them.
Okay.
So practices like meditation and yoga can cultivate mindfulness. But even simple things, like paying attention to your breath or the sensations in your body, can bring you back to the present moment.
So it's about tuning in to what's happening right here, right now,
Yes,
instead of getting lost in those, anxious thoughts about the past or the future.
exactly. And grounding techniques are similar in that they help anchor you to the present moment, especially when anxiety feels overwhelming.
Right.
And one simple technique is the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. It's like a mental checklist, right?
It is. You intentionally notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And this helps shift your attention away from anxious thoughts
Right.
and reconnect you with your immediate surroundings.
It's like hitting the reset button on your senses, bringing you back to reality. I can see how that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And another powerful tool for managing anxiety is physical activity.
I've always heard that exercise is good for mental health, but how does it actually work?
Well, when you exercise, your body releases endorphins, and these have mood-boosting and anxiety-reducing effects. Even a brisk walk or a short workout can make a difference.
Okay.
Plus, exercise can help shift your focus away from those anxious thoughts and provide a sense of accomplishment as well.
Okay, so we've got deep breathing, CBT, mindfulness, grounding techniques, and exercise. That's a pretty diverse toolkit for tackling anxiety.
Right.
But what about when we're dealing with depression?
Right.
How do those strategies kind of apply?
Well, while some of these techniques can be helpful for depression as well, there are some specific approaches that can be particularly effective. One key element is establishing a routine.
Okay. That sounds really challenging, especially when depression often kind of zaps your energy and motivation. How do you even begin to build a routine when you're feeling that low?
Well, you're right. It's not easy. But even small steps can make a big difference. Start by setting small, achievable goals for yourself.
Okay.
Like getting out of bed and getting dressed, eating regular meals, taking a short walk. As you start to accomplish these small tasks, you'll likely find that your motivation gradually increases.
It's like building momentum.
Yes.
One small win at a time.
Exactly. And as you start to regain a sense of structure, you'll likely find that your mood and energy levels begin to improve too. And never underestimate the power of social connection, especially when you're struggling with depression.
Yeah, I can imagine that depression can make you feel very isolated.
It can. And that isolation can actually worsen depressive symptoms. That's why reaching out to others, even if it feels incredibly difficult, is so important. Talking to a trusted friend or family member, joining a support group, or even connecting with someone online can remind you that you're not alone and provide that much-needed sense of belonging.
Right, like that saying, shared joy is doubled and shared sorrow is halved.
Exactly. Just having someone to listen and validate your feelings can make a world of difference. And as we discussed with anxiety, CBT can be incredibly helpful for managing depression as well.
I see the connection. So it's not just about managing our feelings, but also about addressing the thoughts that contribute to those feelings.
Exactly. Remember, negative thought patterns are a hallmark of depression, just as they are with anxiety. Thoughts like, I'm worthless, nothing good ever happens, or I'll never get better, these can keep us trapped in a cycle of despair.
Yeah, it's like those thoughts become a distorted lens through which we view ourselves and the world.
Yes, and CBT helps us challenge those distortions and develop more balanced and realistic ways of thinking.
Okay.
So instead of thinking I'm worthless, you might ask yourself, well, what are some of my strengths? Or what evidence do I have to support that thought?
So it's about shifting our focus from the negative to the positive, or at least to a more balanced perspective.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that our thoughts are not always accurate, and we have the power to choose more helpful ways of thinking. And in addition to challenging negative thoughts, it's also essential to cultivate self-compassion, especially when you're struggling with depression.
Self-compassion. What does that look like in practice?
Well, self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a close friend. It's about recognizing that you're human, that you're going through a tough time, and that it's okay to not be okay. So instead of beating yourself up for feeling depressed, you acknowledge your feelings without judgment. You remind yourself that you deserve care and support just like anyone else.
That's a really powerful reminder. I think we often extend compassion to others more easily than we extend it to ourselves.
That's true. But learning to be kind to ourselves, especially when we're struggling, can be incredibly healing. And sometimes, despite our best efforts, we may need additional support.
You're talking about seeking professional help, right?
Yeah. Exactly. There's absolutely no shame in seeking help from a mental health professional. In fact, it's a sign of strength and self-awareness.
Yeah. So what are some signs that someone might benefit from professional help?
Well, if you're feeling overwhelmed by your emotions, if your symptoms are interfering with your daily life or your relationships or your work, if you're having thoughts of harming yourself, or if you've tried self-help strategies and haven't found relief, it's definitely time to reach out.
So it sounds like it's about recognizing your limits and knowing when to ask for help.
Right, and there's no shame in doing so.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a sign of strength and self-awareness. Mental health professionals are trained to help you navigate these challenges, and they can develop a personalized treatment plan for you.
So it's about finding that support that's right for you, whether it's therapy, medication, or a combination of both.
Exactly. And remember, recovery is a journey. It's not a destination.
Right.
There will be ups and downs along the way, but with the right support and self-care practices, you can navigate these challenges and live a full and meaningful life.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our conversation, from understanding the distinction between everyday feelings and clinical conditions, to exploring a variety of techniques for managing anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve a little deeper into some additional strategies and resources that can be helpful on this journey. So stay tuned.
So, we were talking about routine and social connection and challenging those negative thoughts, but I think it's also important to talk about acceptance.
Acceptance. That sounds a bit counterintuitive. Like,
Yep.
wouldn't accepting anxiety or depression just, like, make it worse?
Not necessarily. It's not about resigning yourself to a life of suffering. Acceptance in this context means acknowledging those feelings, but without judgment. You're recognizing that these conditions are part of your experience right now, but they don't define you as a person.
Okay, so it's more about, like, making space for those feelings without letting them take over.
Yeah. Exactly. When we resist or deny our emotions, we often just intensify them. But when we can acknowledge them with compassion, it can create a sense of spaciousness that allows us to move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like that saying, what you resist persists.
Precisely. And along with acceptance, I think it's also really important to cultivate a sense of gratitude, even when you're feeling down.
Gratitude. That seems like a pretty tall order, when you're struggling with depression.
I understand. But even small acts of gratitude can shift your perspective. It doesn't have to be anything grand. Maybe it's just appreciating a warm cup of coffee, a sunny day, a kind gesture from a stranger. Just little things.
So it's about intentionally focusing on the good things, even amidst the challenges.
Right. It's not about denying those difficult feelings, but it's about intentionally bringing some balance into your emotional experience.
Right. I can see how that could be helpful. It's like almost like training your brain to look for the positive, even when things feel bleak.
Exactly. And, sometimes we just need a little extra support in shifting our perspective and finding that balance. And that's where things like creative outlets can be so valuable.
Creative outlets. How do those tie into managing anxiety and depression?
Well, creative activities, things like painting, writing, music, or even gardening, they can provide a really healthy outlet for expressing emotions. And they can be incredibly therapeutic too, offering a sense of accomplishment, distraction from those negative thoughts, and even, a flow state where you lose yourself in the moment.
Okay, so it's not just about making art. It's about the process itself.
Yes, it's about engaging in activities that bring you joy, help you process your emotions, allow you to connect with a different part of yourself.
Okay.
And along those lines, spending time in nature can also be incredibly restorative.
Yeah. I've definitely felt, the calming effects of being outdoors. What is it about nature that has such a positive impact on our well-being?
Well, nature has this way of soothing our nervous systems and grounding us in the present moment.
Yeah.
Whether it's taking a walk in the park, listening to the birds sing, or just, feeling the sun on your skin, connecting with nature can be incredibly healing.
It's like hitting the reset button on our minds and bodies.
Exactly. And speaking of resetting, let's talk about the importance of sleep.
Okay, yeah. Sleep, that's essential for everyone. But why is it particularly important for those struggling with anxiety and depression?
Well, when we're sleep deprived, our emotional resilience takes a real hit. We become more irritable, more anxious, and more vulnerable to those negative thoughts. Adequate sleep, on the other hand, helps regulate our mood, improves our cognitive function, and boosts our overall well-being.
So it's not just about getting enough sleep. It's about making sleep a priority.
Absolutely. Creating a relaxing bedtime routine, limiting screen time before bed, making sure you have a comfortable sleep environment. All of these things can contribute to better sleep quality.
Those are all really great tips. And while we're on the topic of self-care, what about nutrition? Does what we eat actually impact our mental health?
There's a growing body of research that suggests a really strong link between diet and mental health. A balanced diet, one that's rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean protein, can provide the nutrients our brains need to function optimally.
So it's not just about, reaching for that comfort food when you're feeling down. It's about nourishing our bodies with foods that actually support our mental well-being.
Exactly. And on the flip side, limiting processed foods, sugary drinks, excessive caffeine can also have a positive impact on mood and energy levels.
Makes sense. So we've talked about a lot of strategies for managing anxiety and depression,
Mm.
from deep breathing to creative outlets to the importance of sleep and nutrition. But what happens when these strategies just aren't enough?
Right.
When do we know it's time to seek professional help?
That's a crucial question. While those self-help strategies can be incredibly helpful, they're not a replacement for professional care when it's needed. So if your symptoms are severe, if they're interfering with your ability to function in daily life,
Uh-huh.
if you're having thoughts of harming yourself, or if you've tried self-help strategies and you just haven't found relief, it's essential to reach out to a mental health professional.
So it's about recognizing your limits and knowing when to ask for help.
Right. And there's no shame in doing so. In fact, it's a sign of strength and self-awareness. Mental health professionals, they're trained to help you navigate these challenges, and they can develop a personalized treatment plan that's right for you.
So it's about finding the support that's right for you, whether it's therapy, medication, or a combination of both.
Exactly. And remember, recovery is a journey, not a destination. There will be setbacks and challenges along the way, but with the right support and self-care practices, you can navigate those bumps in the road and continue to move forward.
Okay. So what are some ways that people can find, the right support and resources?
Well, there are so many resources available these days. You can start by talking to your primary care physician. They can often refer you to a mental health specialist. There are also online directories of therapists and counselors, as well as mental health hotlines and support groups.
That's encouraging to know that there's help out there, and it's becoming more and more accessible.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that you are not alone in this. Millions of people struggle with anxiety and depression, and there's this growing community of support and understanding. Don't be afraid to reach out and connect with others who are going through similar experiences.
That's a powerful message. We've covered so much ground in this conversation. I'm sure our listeners have gleaned a lot of valuable insights. We're going to take another quick pause, and when we return, we'll wrap up our discussion with some final thoughts and words of encouragement. So we're back, and it's been a really enlightening conversation. We've covered so much about anxiety and depression and all sorts of ways to manage it. But before we wrap up, I'd love to just hear your thoughts on what gives you hope when it comes to, mental health.
That's a great question. I think what gives me hope is the increasing awareness and openness surrounding mental health these days.
Hmm.
It's no longer this taboo subject. People are much more willing to talk about their struggles and to seek help.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a growing sense of community and support, and that's really heartening to see.
Absolutely. And with that increased awareness, comes a greater understanding of these conditions, which leads to, advancements in treatment and prevention.
Yeah, it's inspiring to see the progress being made in research and the development of new therapies and approaches.
Yeah. And beyond, the scientific advancements, I find hope in the resilience of the human spirit.
Mhm.
I've witnessed, countless individuals navigate, incredible challenges, and they emerge stronger on the other side.
That's a beautiful reminder that, there's so much strength and courage within each of us.
And I think it's, important to remember that healing is a journey. It's not a, straight line. There will be setbacks, there will be challenges along the way, but, with the right support, with those self-care practices, we can navigate those bumps in the road and we can continue to move forward.
It's not about perfection, it's about progress and self-compassion.
Exactly. And sometimes the greatest growth comes from our most challenging experiences, We learn, we adapt, we discover new strengths within ourselves.
Well said. As we wrap up our look at anxiety and depression, I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways here. First, remember that you are not alone. Millions of people struggle with these conditions, and there is a growing community of support out there.
And remember that there are effective strategies for managing these challenges, from those simple self-care practices that we talked about to seeking professional help when it's needed.
And finally, remember that healing is possible. It may not be easy, but with the right tools and the right support, you can navigate these conditions and you can live a full and meaningful life.
Thanks for joining us. We hope this conversation has empowered you with some knowledge and some hope and a sense of possibility.
Absolutely. And remember, taking care of your mental health is an act of strength and self-love. Be kind to yourself, seek support when you need it, and never give up hope.
Until next time, take care. Be well.